Imagine sitting in a quiet cafe on a gray afternoon. Rain taps softly against the windows. Cutlery clinks. Conversations hum in the background. And in the corner, near the window, sits an 81-year-old veteran. No medals on display. No uniform. No announcement of who he once was. Just a man. Tea cooling slowly in his hands. He doesn't command attention. He doesn't ask for it. But across the room, someone notices him. Not because he's loud. Not because he's important. Because he looks vulnerable. And sometimes in certain rooms that's enough. The younger man isn't angry. He isn't even particularly aggressive. He's just testing something. Testing space. Testing boundaries. Testing whether anyone will respond. A comment is made. Too loud. A few heads turn. The veteran doesn't. Another remark follows. Closer this time. You can feel the air shift. Now here's the question. When someone pushes like that, what are they really looking for? A reaction? An audience? A sense of control? The veteran finally looks up. Not startled. Not afraid. Just steady. And sometimes steady unsettles people more than shouting ever could. There's a brief moment, the kind that stretches longer than it should. And then something happens. Not dramatic. Not explosive. But enough to make the room uncomfortable. Chairs pause mid-scrape. Conversations stall. Eyes avoid meeting each other. Because everyone feels it. That invisible line that just got crossed. Now imagine this. Before anyone decides what to do next, the cafe door opens. Not loudly. Not theatrically. Just the quiet sound of a bell above the frame. Someone steps inside. No rush. No raised voice. Just presence. And somehow, without a single word spoken, the energy in the room changes. What is it about certain people that shifts a space the moment they arrive? Is it size? Reputation? Or something less visible? Something calmer? Because sometimes the real turning point in a story isn't the confrontation. It's who walks in after. And what they choose to do next. The bell above the cafe door stops ringing. The man who entered doesn't scan the room dramatically. He doesn't rush. He simply pauses. And in that pause, something subtle happens. Most people don't notice the details in tense moments. They only remember the noise. But tension rarely begins with noise. It begins with perception. Across the cafe, the younger man who had been testing the veteran's space shifts slightly in his chair. Not because he's afraid. Because he's recalculating. Who just walked in? Why does the room feel different? The newcomer isn't dressed to impress. No heavy boots slamming against the floor. No obvious display of authority. Just simple clothing. Steady posture. Calm breathing. And that calmness stands out. Because moments earlier, the energy in the room had been uneven, tilted toward ego. Now it feels balanced again. This isn't about physical strength. It's about psychological space. In social environments, especially public ones, people test invisible boundaries all the time. A comment here. A joke there. A gesture meant to draw a reaction. Most of the time, it's not even conscious. It's about status. Who commands attention? Who yields? Who reacts? The veteran hadn't reacted the way the younger man expected. No outrage. No argument. No dramatic defense. Just composure. And composure can be confusing to someone looking for dominance. The newcomer, the veteran's son, doesn't immediately approach. He simply acknowledges his father with a nod. Small detail, but powerful. Because respect, when shown quietly, carries weight. The younger man laughs again, but it sounds thinner now. Less certain. There's a difference between teasing someone who appears alone and realizing they're not. But this still isn't about numbers. It's about alignment. When someone stands beside you calmly, without escalating, without demanding attention, it removes the imbalance. And here's where most people misunderstand situations like this. They expect confrontation. They expect raised voices. They expect retaliation. But real authority rarely announces itself. The son doesn't step forward aggressively. He doesn't make threats. He doesn't even address the younger man directly. He simply takes the empty chair beside his father and sits. That's it. No performance. Just presence. And something interesting happens. The room relaxes. Because escalation requires participation. And no one is participating anymore. The younger man glances around, perhaps looking for validation, for someone to laugh with him. No one does. Moments earlier he had an audience. Now he has silence. And silence can feel louder than confrontation. The veteran lifts his tea again, hands steady. The son mirrors the calm. 2 generations. Not displaying strength. Demonstrating it. Psychologically, this is what shifts power dynamics. Control over reaction. Anyone can raise their voice. Anyone can create a scene. But not everyone can remain composed when challenged, especially in public. The younger man adjusts in his seat again. His earlier energy has nowhere to land now. No argument to push against. No anger to amplify. So it dissipates. Not defeated. Just diffused. And maybe that's the real turning point. Because what we're witnessing isn't intimidation. It's emotional discipline. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. The kind that doesn't need victory. Just balance restored. And in a quiet cafe, on an ordinary gray afternoon, balance can feel like the loudest statement of all. For a few seconds nothing happens. And yet everything is happening. The younger man shifts again, tapping his fingers lightly against the table. It's subtle but restless. The energy he brought into the room earlier hasn't disappeared, it just doesn't know where to go. Across from him, the veteran and his son sit side by side. No whispering. No strategizing. No visible reaction. Just calm. And calm in moments like this can feel disarming. The younger man leans back, forcing a chuckle as if to reclaim the atmosphere. "Relax," he mutters, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "It was just a joke." There it is. The soft retreat disguised as humor. But humor depends on shared agreement. And no one is agreeing. The veteran looks at him again, not sharply, not accusingly, just directly. It's the kind of eye contact that doesn't challenge, but doesn't retreat either. Measured. The son finally speaks, his voice even. "Is everything all right here?" Not a threat. Not an accusation. A question. And questions are powerful because they shift responsibility. The younger man hesitates. For a fraction of a second, he looks younger than he did before. Less confident. Less certain. "Yeah," he says quickly. "Fine." But something in the room has already changed. Earlier he controlled the rhythm, the comments, the volume, the attention. Now the rhythm feels slower. Grounded. The son's posture hasn't moved much. Shoulders relaxed. Hands resting loosely on the table. Breathing steady. That steadiness communicates something words don't need to. Awareness. He's not tense. He's not preparing to react. He's simply present. And presence, when it's intentional, creates boundaries without announcing them. The younger man tries once more, a lighter remark, almost playful. But it lands flat. Without tension to bounce off, it falls into the space between tables and disappears. Silence returns. But this silence isn't awkward. It's clarifying. Because everyone in the cafe now understands something that wasn't clear before. This moment isn't going to escalate. There will be no dramatic confrontation. No sudden explosion. Just a quiet recalibration of respect. The veteran adjusts his sleeve slightly. A small movement. Age visible in the careful precision of it. The son notices and subtly moves the sugar closer to him without comment. Again small. But meaningful. Because strength isn't always displayed outwardly. Sometimes it's protective. Tentative. Controlled. The younger man exhales and looks away first. Not dramatically. Just long enough to break the tension. And that, more than anything, signals the shift. In social psychology, dominance often depends on who withdraws attention first. Who maintains eye contact. Who sets emotional tempo. But here, dominance isn't the goal. Stability is. The son didn't arrive to overpower the room. He arrived to stabilize it. And when stability is reintroduced into an unstable dynamic, the imbalance corrects itself. The younger man picks up his drink, takes a sip, then stares into it as if reconsidering something. Pride wrestles quietly with awareness. He hadn't expected resistance. But he also hadn't expected composure. There's a difference. Aggression feeds on reaction. Composure starves it. And as minutes pass, the cafe gradually resumes its natural rhythm. Conversations restart. Cutlery clinks again. The rain continues outside, indifferent to the human drama inside. Nothing dramatic happened. No one was humiliated. No one was threatened. Yet something significant occurred. A boundary was tested. And it held. Not because someone forced it to, but because someone refused to abandon it. And that's where tension transforms, not into conflict, but into understanding. Sometimes the strongest response isn't escalation. It's restraint. And restraint, when witnessed, carries a quiet authority that no raised voice ever could. And this is where everything quietly shifts. Not with noise. Not with confrontation. But with choice. The younger man stares into his cup a moment longer, as if searching for something to say that would restore the version of himself from 10 minutes ago. The confident one, the one who controlled the room. But control built on reaction is fragile. And the room is no longer reacting. Across the table, the veteran lifts his tea again. His hands are steady. There's no tremor of anger, no visible frustration. Just calm routine. So, set the cup down. The sun mirrors the stillness. He doesn't lean forward. He doesn't square his shoulders. He doesn't signal dominance in any obvious way. He simply exists in the space, fully aware, fully grounded. And that grounded presence does something remarkable. It removes the stage. Earlier, the younger man had an audience. A few smirks. A couple of sideways glances. Just enough validation to continue. Now, no one is watching him anymore. They're watching the silence. Because silence, when shared confidently, becomes magnetic. The younger man clears his throat. Didn't mean anything by it, he mutters, softer now. This time it isn't performative. It's defensive. The son nods once. Not accepting. Not rejecting. Just acknowledging. We're all good, he replies evenly. 3 words. No lecture. No warning. No threat. Just resolution offered without ego. And here's the subtle brilliance of that moment. When someone offers calm instead of conflict, they shift the emotional burden back to the instigator. Escalation would have been easy. But de-escalation requires discipline. The veteran glances at his son briefly, not in gratitude, not in relief, but in recognition. An understanding between them. No dramatic exchange needed. Respect doesn't need subtitles. The younger man shifts in his seat again, but this time it's different. The restless energy has dissolved into self-awareness. Because now the social equation has changed. Earlier he thought he was testing weakness. Now he realizes he was testing restraint. And restraint held. The cafe door opens again as another customer enters, unaware of what just unfolded. The bell rings softly, returning the room fully to normal. Life moves on quickly when drama isn't fed. And that's the real shift. Not victory. Not defeat. But neutrality restored. The son reaches for his coffee, finally taking a sip. Unhurried. Casual. As if nothing extraordinary occurred. And in a way nothing did. No scene. No spectacle. Just a boundary respected. The younger man eventually stands. He doesn't storm out. He doesn't slam his chair. He simply leaves. Not shamed. Not chased. Just quieter than when he arrived. And maybe that's enough. Because growth rarely happens through humiliation. It happens through reflection. As the door closes behind him, the veteran exhales slowly, not from fear but from completion. The moment has passed. He looks at his son. You didn't need to, he says gently. The son smiles faintly. I know. That's important. He didn't need to. He chose to. Chose presence over performance. Chose steadiness over spectacle. And that choice is what changed everything. Most people think power looks loud. Raised voices. Sharp gestures. Dominant posture. But real power often looks like this. 2 people sitting calmly while chaos fades around them. The cafe fully resets now. Conversations swell back to normal volume. Someone laughs at a separate joke. A spoon stirs against porcelain. Ordinary sounds reclaim the space. And yet, anyone who witnessed those few minutes will remember them. Not because something explosive happened, but because something controlled did. Control over emotion. Control over ego. Control over reaction. The son didn't come in to prove strength. He came in to ensure respect. And once respect was restored, he didn't chase applause. He returned to stillness. That's the shift. When the goal isn't to win, but to stabilize. When the aim isn't dominance, but dignity. And perhaps the most powerful detail of all? No one needed to raise their voice to be heard. Because sometimes the loudest statement in a room is the decision not to escalate. Now here's something interesting. If someone had recorded that moment, even just 30 seconds of it, and uploaded it online, what do you think the comments would look like? Who won? Why didn't he fight back? He should have taught him a lesson. That guy backed down fast. The internet loves simple conclusions. It loves clear heroes and obvious villains. It loves before and after transformations where someone gets publicly humbled. But what happened in that cafe doesn't fit neatly into that format. There was no knockout moment. No dramatic speech. No humiliation. Just tension, and then restraint. And restraint doesn't trend easily. That's the problem. Online culture often rewards escalation. The sharper the response, the louder the reaction, the more engagement it generates. But in real life, escalation comes with consequences. Let's imagine the alternative version people might expect. The son walks in, confronts the younger man directly. Voices rise. Chairs scrape. Phones come out. Maybe someone calls security. Maybe the situation spirals into something neither side truly wanted. That version would go viral. But it would also leave damage behind. Instead, what unfolded was something less cinematic and far more mature. The younger man wasn't destroyed. He wasn't shamed. He was given space to recalibrate. And that matters. Because growth rarely happens when someone feels cornered. It happens when someone realizes, quietly, that they misjudged a situation. The veteran didn't demand respect. He embodied it. The son didn't enforce dominance. He reinforced dignity. That distinction is subtle but powerful. And here's where many people misunderstand strength. They confuse it with intimidation. They think power means making others feel small. But real strength often looks like emotional regulation. Think about it. How many conflicts escalate simply because neither person wants to step back first? Ego locks in. Voices rise. And suddenly, something small becomes something irreversible. In that cafe, stepping back didn't mean surrender. It meant control. The son could have turned the moment into a spectacle. Instead, he turned it into a lesson, not through words but through posture. Through breathing. Through tone. That's harder than throwing insults. That's harder than matching aggression. Because it requires awareness. And awareness is quiet. Now imagine this scenario online. A short clip circulates with a dramatic caption. Man disrespects veteran, instantly regrets it. But regret isn't always explosive. Sometimes regret is subtle. It's the slight shift in posture. The softened voice. The decision to leave without another comment. Those details wouldn't make a viral thumbnail. But they reveal something deeper. The younger man wasn't crushed. He was confronted with composure. And composure leaves no target. There's nothing to fight. Nothing to push against. Aggression without resistance eventually exhausts itself. That's what happened. And perhaps the most important part? The son didn't stay standing like a guard. He didn't loom. He sat. At the same level. Because the goal wasn't intimidation. It was balance. When balance is restored, tension loses its fuel. This is where the internet often gets it wrong. It assumes silence equals weakness. It assumes calm equals fear. But sometimes silence is evaluation. And calm is mastery. If the moment had turned physical, everyone would remember it for the wrong reasons. Instead, it became something else. A demonstration. Not of physical power. But of emotional discipline. And emotional discipline is harder to cultivate than muscle or bravado. Anyone can react. Few can regulate. Now step back from the cafe for a second. Think about your own life. How many times have you felt that pull, that urge to respond instantly when someone crosses a line? That tightening in your chest. That internal voice saying, say something. Do something. And how often does reacting actually improve the situation? The son in that cafe didn't suppress emotion. He controlled it. There's a difference. Suppression builds pressure. Control channels it. He acknowledged the tension. He addressed it calmly. And then he let it end. No lingering glare. No victory pose. Just closure. If this had been a dramatic confrontation, it would have satisfied curiosity. But because it was controlled, it invites reflection. That's rare. And maybe that's why it matters more. The strongest presence in a room isn't always the one commanding attention. Sometimes it's the one steady enough to change the atmosphere without demanding credit. Online, people would still ask, who won? But that question misses the entire point. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about refusing to lose control. And in a world that constantly pushes for louder reactions, that might be the quietest kind of strength there is. Now slow everything down. Forget the cafe. Forget the younger man. Forget the moment. Think about this instead. Strength isn't loud. Read that again. Strength isn't loud. We've been taught, through films, headlines, and viral clips, that power looks dramatic. That it announces itself. That it makes an entrance and leaves an impact everyone can see. But real strength? It often passes quietly. In that cafe, nothing spectacular happened. No raised fists. No security rushing in. No applause. And yet something meaningful occurred. Someone chose control over impulse. That choice is invisible. But it changes everything. Because most confrontations don't begin with violence. They begin with emotion. Embarrassment. Ego. Insecurity. Pride. When someone feels small, they often try to make someone else feel smaller. The younger man wasn't necessarily cruel. He was careless. Testing space. seeking reaction. And when he didn't get the explosive response he expected, something shifted inside him. That's the part people overlook. Composure forces reflection. When aggression meets aggression, both sides escalate. When aggression meets calm, one side has to reconsider. And reconsidering is uncomfortable. But it's also how people grow. Now bring this back to your own life. When was the last time someone underestimated you? Not dramatically, just subtly. A dismissive tone. A joke that went too far. A comment meant to test your boundaries. Did you react instantly? Or did you pause? That pause is powerful. Because in that space between stimulus and response, you decide who you are. The son in the cafe didn't arrive to dominate. He arrived to stabilize. There's a difference. Dominance seeks control over others. Stability seeks control over self. One is loud. The other is grounded. And grounded people don't need to prove anything. They don't rush to win arguments. They don't chase validation. They don't perform strength. They embody it. Notice something else. The veteran didn't demand protection. He wasn't helpless. He was composed. That composure likely came from decades of experience. Moments far more difficult than an uncomfortable cafe exchange. Perspective changes reaction. When you've faced real challenges, minor provocations lose their power. And that's another lesson hidden in the story. Not every battle deserves participation. Some moments test whether you can remain centered when someone else tries to pull you off balance. The younger man expected resistance. He expected noise. He expected drama. He didn't expect discipline. Discipline unsettles people who rely on chaos. Because chaos needs fuel. And discipline doesn't provide it. Now imagine if the son had reacted aggressively. Even if justified. Even if understandable. The room would have filled with adrenaline instead of calm. The veteran's dignity would have been overshadowed by spectacle. And the lesson would have been lost. Instead, the takeaway became clearer. Confidence isn't aggressive. It's assured. It doesn't flare up at every challenge. It chooses when to engage. And more importantly, when not to. That's maturity. That's growth. That's strength that doesn't need witnesses. And here's something subtle but important. The younger man wasn't humiliated publicly. He was given a chance to adjust privately. That matters. Because humiliation breeds resentment. Reflection breeds change. When someone realizes they misjudged a situation without being attacked for it, they're more likely to learn from it. The cafe returned to normal. Life continued. But internally, each person who witnessed that moment absorbed something. A reminder. That reacting loudly doesn't equal winning. That staying composed doesn't equal weakness. That sometimes the most powerful move is the one that prevents escalation entirely. Now pause for a second. Think about a situation in your own life that's currently tense. Maybe at work. Maybe in your family. Maybe with someone who constantly tests boundaries. Ask yourself, are you trying to win? Or are you trying to stabilize? Those are very different goals. Winning creates opponents. Stabilizing creates resolution. The son stabilized the room. The veteran maintained dignity. And the younger man quietly recalibrated. No headlines. No viral clip. Just a quiet example of what controlled strength looks like. In a world that rewards outrage, choosing calm is radical. In a culture that amplifies conflict, choosing restraint is powerful. And maybe that's the real lesson. Strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about mastering yourself. Because when you master yourself, you don't need to master the room. It shifts on its own. By the time the veteran and his son finish their drinks, the cafe feels ordinary again. The rain has slowed outside. The light through the windows is softer now. Afternoon turning into evening. If someone walked in at this exact moment, they would never know anything had happened. And that's the point. The strongest moments in life rarely look dramatic from the outside. They look normal, calm, unremarkable. But inside those moments, decisions are made. Decisions about who you are, what you tolerate, how you respond. The veteran stands slowly, adjusting his coat with careful movements that speak more about patience than age. His son rises beside him, not hovering, not guiding, just aligned. They don't scan the room. They don't search for validation. They don't make eye contact with the younger man, who now sits quieter than before, absorbed in his own thoughts. There is no victory parade. No final word. Just departure. And sometimes, leaving peacefully is the loudest statement you can make. Because when you don't need the last word, you demonstrate something deeper than dominance. You demonstrate security. Security in who you are. Security in what you represent. Security in knowing that dignity doesn't require applause. As they walk toward the door, the bell rings again, the same soft chime that marked the shift earlier. But this time it marks closure. The cafe continues. Life continues. And maybe the younger man will forget the details over time. But he won't forget the feeling. That moment when his attempt to control the atmosphere dissolved. Not because someone overpowered him, but because someone refused to be provoked. That feeling lingers. And that's where growth often begins. We talk a lot about strength in dramatic terms. We celebrate knockouts. We share heated exchanges. We replay confrontations. But rarely do we highlight restraint. Rarely do we say, "That's powerful." Yet think about the moments in your own life that shaped you most. Were they always loud? Or were they quiet realizations? The time you chose not to respond to an insult. The time you let someone speak without interrupting. The time you walked away from something that could have spiraled. Those decisions don't trend online, but they change you. The son in the cafe didn't need to assert dominance. He didn't need to threaten. He didn't need to perform. He simply aligned himself with respect. And respect, when embodied calmly, shifts energy. There's something magnetic about a person who isn't easily moved. Not cold. Not detached. Just grounded. Grounded people don't absorb chaos. They absorb tension and return stability. And that's rare. In a world constantly pushing for reaction, being non-reactive can feel almost rebellious. We're conditioned to respond instantly. To defend quickly. To match tone with tone. But what if real strength isn't matching energy? What if it's managing it? The younger man entered that cafe thinking strength was about control over others. He left understanding, perhaps only slightly, perhaps subconsciously, that control over self is far more powerful. And maybe that's the message that lingers with you. Not the disrespect. Not the tension. But the choice. Because at every point in that story someone had a choice. The veteran could have reacted sharply. He didn't. The son could have escalated. He didn't. The younger man could have doubled down. He didn't. Each choice prevented something worse. Each choice preserved dignity. And dignity, once protected, doesn't need revenge. It stands on its own. Now imagine applying that in your own world. At work, when someone questions you unfairly. At home, when emotions rise quickly. In public, when someone tests your patience. You can react. Or you can respond. Reaction is immediate. Response is intentional. Reaction seeks to win. Response seeks to stabilize. And stabilizing doesn't make headlines. But it builds character. Maybe the strongest person in the room isn't the one who dominates it. Maybe it's the one who can sit calmly, while tension tries to pull them off center. Maybe it's the one who doesn't need to prove anything, because their presence already speaks. The cafe moment will never go viral. There's no dramatic footage. No shocking twist. Just two people choosing composure. And one person learning something quietly. But perhaps that's why it matters more. Because strength that needs witnesses is fragile. Strength that exists without performance is durable. So the next time you feel tested, the next time someone mistakes your silence for weakness, remember this. Calm is not surrender. Restraint is not fear. And walking away with dignity is not losing. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who doesn't need to win. If that perspective changed the way you see strength, then you already understand the lesson.